Go. All right. We need about 2.5 minutes.
2 more minutes?
Yeah, 2 more minutes, but you can keep it live though.
Darren, can you hear me?
Actually, that yes, I can.
Okay, great.
Perfect. And we do have a quorum, correct? Well, good afternoon, everyone. We're going to go ahead and call to order the Audit and Finance meeting for committee meeting for December 5th, 2023. It is now 14:02, and I want to welcome everyone that is here. Can we begin with a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 We have ayes. Any opposed? No opposed. Moving forward, we will move to the approval of the minutes. Has everyone had a chance to read the minutes? I'm sure. If we have hearing no objections to the minutes, can we get a motion to approve the minutes for November 7th, 2023?
So moved.
We have a motion.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we're gonna move. I would like to call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. We will now go to the motion to for the nomination of committee vice chair. I would like to nominate Ms. Darlene Donmeyer Roberson for the chair for the vice chair seat. Do we have any other nominations? Hearing none, I would like to go ahead and put forward a motion to vote Ms. Darlene Donmeyer Roberson as the committee vice chair.
So moved.
We have a motion with a second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Aye.
Thank you.
All right, so moving forward, Ms. Darlene Donmeyer Roberson, board member, will be the committee vice chair for the Audit and Finance Committee. We will now move into our information items, and I see Austin just walked in. So we will move forward to item 2A, the Esser Funds audit results.
Good afternoon, everyone. I think we have a deck to share. There we go.
And can you pull your microphone up a little bit?
Yep.
Thank you.
Awesome. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Austin Miller. I'm with Frazier and Dieter, public accounting firm based in the Southeast. I'm a director in our advisory services department, which includes internal audit. And our team has been contracted with the district to perform an internal audit over its Esser funds and the expenditures related to the Esser funds. You can go to the next slide, please. I know many of you are aware of kind of multiple audits that are going on covering Esser. So I wanted to call out just a few of the key differences between what we're doing on the internal audit side and then what has recently been covered in the past on the single audit. So certainly, on the single audit side, we can let that firm speak to their scope, but primarily their focus areas are finance and accounting, compliance, looking at the budget and the associated items there. They might touch some of the other areas that are in this graphic here, but the point we're trying to get across is the internal audit is not just limited to compliance and finances. We're actually looking at procedural documentation, efficiencies, IT from an access perspective, vendor management and procurement. And I think the main one we want to call out here are the targeted inspection items that we were able to address based on the board's concerns, specifically related to the use of the procurement exemptions, the use of the various schools account, that 127 account, some of the community-based organizations and how those were selected, contractor usage, et cetera. So things that might fall outside of the scope of the single audit are some areas we were able to address with the internal audit. And then the scope of our review covered all three Esser funds, Esser 1, 2, and 3 for fiscal years 21, 22, and 23. So there's a lot of information here, so I'll just cover the highlighted information. These are just some of the procedures that were performed as part of this internal audit. So we began with interviews of nearly 24 key stakeholders that were involved in Esser fund management, many of which I believe are in the room today. From there, we did a lot of what we call substantive testing or risk-based testing. And from a transaction perspective, we took a sampling approach because, as you can imagine, over 3 fiscal years and 3 Esser funds, there were a lot of transactions. So we wanted to hone in on some of the higher risk areas, which we did using a combination of random and judgmental sampling. So looking at some potential one-off expenditures, expenses related to professional services, large sum, more material expenses, et cetera. And we also wanted to make sure we had even coverage over the fiscal years in the Esser funds. Some of the areas that we were looking at, programmatic initiatives, specifically to the budget development, finalization, and monitoring of the learning loss initiatives, health and safety protocols, community involvement and communication, technology requirements, all of those key areas that were called out as part of the Esser program. Additionally, from a transaction perspective, we reviewed Esser funds paid for via P-card, expenses that hit that various schools account, the 127 account, the use of exemptions, the alignment of Esser usage to the established or the allowable categories, budget to actual analysis for the 3 fiscal years, and then the vendor and CBO selection process. Move to the next slide. So this is just a brief overview of kind of how we categorize our ratings. So with internal audit, it's a little bit different. We're not issuing an opinion over these Esser funds. We are providing information to management to act on to mitigate risk. And these 4 areas are kind of what we categorize as ratings based on our results. This is a combination of what we discovered from an internal control perspective and also the district's ability to mitigate future risk. So the 4 ratings: satisfactory, satisfactory with recommendations, needs improvement, and unsatisfactory. We've got the definitions there, but essentially satisfactory would be, very clean, no findings or recommendations, everything's in order. Satisfactory with recommendations there are some observations, but potentially some control deficiencies or areas that need to be addressed to mitigate future risk. And then going down the list, just gets a little bit more significant from there in terms of the findings and deficiencies that were discovered. So this is the kind of the summary page of what we found. Overall, our determination was satisfactory with recommendations. Again, that is indicative that there were some deficiencies or observations, but none that we deemed significant enough to pose substantial future risk to the district. As we looked at that scope, a lot of the findings we have here are related to that. So I'll just go through one by one and happy to address any questions that you all have along the way. Various schools account. So we looked at 25 P-card expenses and then 25 non-P-card expenses related to that various schools account. And we noted that 23 of the 25 purchases for the P-cards, which totaled a little under 10K, were actually purchases for individual schools. Some examples of that are, furniture for one particular elementary school for the calming room, exercise equipment for a specific school. So things that obviously should not have been charged to a various schools account when it could easily be traced to one specific school. The actual dollar value there, as you can imagine, is not very material, but from a risk and control perspective, there is an opportunity for that account to be abused if that's not addressed going forward, which we'll get into some of the corrective actions that we've worked with management to cover after this presentation. P card usage. So within the P card policy, there is information about how Title I funds should be handled, which are obviously federal funds. And based on the nature, the federal nature of the funds for Esser, those funds should be handled in a similar manner where there is an Esser fund manager assigned in approving those expenses related to P cards. That was missing from the policy and just something that wasn't in place throughout the Esser or throughout the scope of this audit. CBO selection process. So this is an area where we noted that there was a process in place. A scorecard was developed to identify the highest ranking CBOs to be selected by the district. However, when we received the individual scoring for each of the selected CBOs, 4 of the 11 were missing from the documentation. We couldn't see any area where those were actually rated. And then there wasn't really any clear threshold into how they go about selecting those CBOs based on the scoring. You can see that we have an example here of many of the CBOs scoring under 70 and even a few scoring under 50 out of 100. So it seemed like there was a process in place that just wasn't fully rolled out or adhered to in terms of how those CBOs ended up being ultimately selected. Procurement exemptions. I know this was a topic that the board had some concerns about. So we did note that the district lacked sufficient and or appropriate documentation related to the procurement exemptions used for Esser funds. While the exemptions would have been appropriate, the categorization of those exemptions under state rules were appropriate because of these Esser funds and the federal nature of those, and the fact that the district was a subgrantee of those funds. Those exemptions were not allowed. Again, I'll let the stakeholders speak to some of the corrective actions that are in place for that. And then finally, sustainability. I know this is something that there are a lot of current actions in place to address, but due to the high risk nature and the number of FTEs and programs that are currently being funded by Esser, want to make sure we call out that, as of the end of this audit, there still haven't been formal plans or decisions on how to move forward with that. So just want to make sure we call that out. Before I turn it over to some of the stakeholders to talk about the corrective action plans we've discussed as a team, any questions I can address?
All right, we'll move forward with the people online first. Ms. Roberson?
No, I don't have any questions right now for Austin. I may have some questions once I hear from the stakeholders.
Absolutely.
All right, Mr. Grabowski?
Hey, can you hear me, Mr. Calhoun?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, Mr. Austin, I'm really kind of interested in on your community. If you could go back to that one slide, the slide before the question slide, where you laid out the areas you were looking at. Oops.
We're working on it.
And it really goes back to the community-based organizations and any of the and I agree with Ms. Roberson. I think a lot of this is going to come back to what staff is going to say has been taken to correct these measures. My main concern about what this audit is, thank you, there we go, that this audit is finding and is looking into is that, we're now, almost a couple years into this. And this community-based organization, the documentation for criteria scoring and everything seems like this would have been pretty critical to have done at the very, very beginning. And I would really love to know who is responsible for overseeing this on, how this was done. I'm not so sure. This is obviously an internal review, so that we're really just being trying to apply this audit to what the feds require and as to their reporting. And this has been a point of contention since I've been on the board regarding the community-based organizations and what type of information they have been providing us. We, I think, have done a great job in showing where our money has been going and how it's, but I'm more worried about this community-based organization, what kind of documentation they have been providing to the district to show that they have been using the money appropriately. And so when I see that the CBO selection process lacks sufficient documentation for criteria scoring, I'm really kind of confused exactly as to what that means, because I've never seen any documentation presented regarding the community-based organizations, as how they spent the money, whether we've been checking to make sure they've been spending the money. And so it's really, my question goes back to, is in your audit, was that something that you were looking at?
Yeah, so the ongoing monitoring of those CBOs was not something we looked at. We looked at the due diligence and onboarding process for those CBOs, and that's what this finding leads to, is the selection and kind of the criteria that the district was using to evaluate the CBOs on the front end, any due diligence, conflicts of interest, et cetera, that would be considered. However, we did not get into the ongoing monitoring of those CBOs.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's it, Mr. Calhoun.
Thank you. And I think when we get to the staff portion of it, we can talk a little bit more about that as well. What else do we have? Do we have Mr. Duke?
Nope, I'm good. I have no questions.
Right. I don't believe Ms. Stamp is on, correct? Right. So
No, I think she has to be excused, Mr. Calhoun.
absolutely. So we'll move to the members in the room. Nothing.
Yeah, I want to hear the staff's perspectives on these things, but if we could leave that slide up, because it kind of details the 4 different areas. Maybe when the staff goes through it, if you could maybe give us some sense of perspective on like an example of what one of these findings means and what the implications are, just to help us understand it better.
Sure.
Thank you. And I'm sure we get some more questions for you as well, but we go to Ms. Carlin.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. So after we saw this report, the finance and procurement team were pulled together and developed a corrective action plan. And basically, so the first one that involves the various schools account, which is the account 0127. What we're going to do, this is not something that we can come up with a corrective action plan immediately, because some financial analysis needs to be done on that actual account to develop some thresholds. But one of the things that we definitely want to do is develop a dollar threshold that will be established, requiring purchases to be charged directly to the school instead of being charged to this particular account. We don't know what that looks like. That's why I said we need to go back and look at some of those expenditures and set the threshold. We may not set a dollar threshold. It may be a school quantity threshold. So we just need some time to look at that, and we'll start looking at that very quickly. Something else we want to do is we've been doing a really good job of cleaning up this particular cost center and not using it except for expenditures that hit 10, 15 schools. But one of the things we want to look at is creating a munis workflow for this particular cost center. So anyone trying to input a requisition or a P card using this account, it's got to come through someone in finance to take a closer look at it. And this will help us also gauge what's being charged this account and do a better job of cleaning it up. Something else we're going to start doing is all P card charges for this particular, will require prior approval from the fund manager. So that's something else we'll do. And then I already discussed this, but basically this district-wide account will be restricted to the finance division leadership only. There's different departments that use this that we probably can put under their own department because it's something they've been doing for several years. But we can probably, for example, there's different things that human resources puts under 127 because it impacts school-wide accounts. But with an effort to try to clean up this cost center, we really could put that under human resources instead of putting it under 127. The next bullet is P card usage, and I'll hand this over to Jeffrey Craven.
Good afternoon, everyone. For the P card usage, the use of federal funds in regards to our procurement code, that's been a recent development in this fiscal year. So any changes that have come from working with the state on the federal funds will be applied to a revision in our P card manual to reflect anything that's required to correct this deficiency and then ensure all of our members and stakeholders are trained on that new manual.
Mhm.
The next bullet point is the community-based organization selection. This is going to involve more people than just finance, with the input from ESSER 3 program leaders as well as others. The district will clearly define guidelines on maintaining and aligning the criteria scoring along with the scoring rubric. We will have a step 1, step 2, step 3, so that everyone is consistently doing the same thing across the board. Another thing that we need to look at is defining clear guidelines on obtaining those scorecards adequately for all the selections of these CBOs. We haven't done a good job on that, and we realize that, but we realize that we've got, like I said, we've got to create a step-by-step process so that everyone knows what to do and how to maintain the scorecards moving forward. And then the next bullet is procurement exemptions, and I'll pass this over to Jeffrey Craven.
Yes, and this finding is related to what I mentioned earlier about those federal funds. And while this is about Esser, this expands outside the scope of Esser to all federal funds. So internal to our department, we've been working through this since the end of September. I think it was on my 4th day on the job. We've been working with this at length, and the new procedures on how we handle federal funds with all aspects within our budget is being in development right now. So going forward, as of September 25th, we have not purchased any goods or services with federal funds without competitive procurement. So going forward, that is not authorized, and we have not done since we were informed by the state on the 25th. And so going forward in our procedures and working with our stakeholders, we will competitively procure any good or service with the use of federal funds.
And then last but not least, sustainability. At the time that we were going through this audit, it is true, we did not have a comprehensive sustainability analysis done on this. However, since then, the district is currently prioritizing dollars that were invested in programs as well as employees, determining what worked by completing impact reports. Everyone's doing these impact reports, and they will be due back to level leaders as well as cabinet. Is it the middle of next month? The 15th of December, excuse me. And so and I'd also like to repeat, the district has put aside $30 million in our general operating fund balance for Esser stabilization. And the intent, of course, is to spend that over multi-years, not spend it all up front. That is the intent. And that has been the message that we have continuously said to leadership about this. And then, as you know, Mr. Kennedy has pulled together what we call an Esser financial cliff team, and they will be conducting analysis of all the impact reports. And that team involves everyone from level leaders to principals to other school staff. It's not just a finance and a cabinet leadership team. And, the district also has potential commitments from community-based foundations that we hope to bring back some more information on that in the near future as well. So that's where we are with our corrective action plan as of today.
Thank you. So I'll go back to Ms. Roberson.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can now.
Okay. My question is to Austin.
Yes.
In your professional opinion, the corrective action plan that's been presented, do you find it acceptable?
Yes. So as internal audit, and this is another key difference compared to the single audit, since we are acting, obviously we're an external firm, but we are acting on behalf of management and the board, we are able to work closely with Jackie and procurement team and everybody else that was impacted by these findings to develop the corrective action plans. So, we had provided some recommendations based on these findings, and work together to develop these corrective actions. So initially, obviously we want to see these carried out and where we end up, but the plan itself, I believe, is robust in addressing these findings, and then we'll just need to make sure we're continuing to monitor the progress to ensure that they actually take place over the coming months.
Okay, so that leads me, thank you for that. That leads me to my next question. Ms. Carlin, in your presentation, I didn't hear specific dates. And so that's concerning to me. When you put these plans, corrective action plans in place, should there not be a timeline to get these things done? And I say that because the things that we are talking about, they're not new. I can own that I was the one that brought up the object code 0127 months ago. And so everyone knew that that was a concern, especially for me. So what's a timeline to get these things taken care of? And I'm particularly concerned about these CBOs, and especially the ones, it's clear that the rubric was not done correctly, but especially the ones that scored lows, but still were awarded contracts. I'm really looking to find the investment, the return on our investment. So how long is it going to take before we actually see the results of this corrective plans? Is it going to be every 30 days that we're going to get an update as a board? Can you speak to that?
Well, so for example, the first one about 127, you are correct. I know you have spoke a lot about this account number and had a lot of questions. And so this one won't be a quick fix. This one's going to take probably at least 60 days, because we want to go back and look not only at quarterly expenses, but as well as monthly expenses to get a good analytical viewpoint of what's being charged to this account. And that will help us start cleaning it up. So that one's not going to be as quick. We probably will have it resolved by June 30th, but I would be hesitant to guarantee something in 60 days. I just don't feel comfortable doing that, but I could commit to a June 30th date. The second bullet, we're already doing. I apologize. Mr. Craven just noted we have not started doing that yet. I'll let you speak to that.
I'd have to put some thought into. I wouldn't want to give you a suspense that we wouldn't be able to meet. We've been down one. We have two allocations for P card. We've been down that one to one member for as long as I've been around. And we should be hiring that person within a couple of weeks. So we're gonna have a new person in the P card section. 60 to 90 days would be a rough guess. Right now would be to do a really good, thorough look at a manual versus just doing a quick quick push through just to finish this need. So if you're fine with a 60 to 90 day window for us to get that complete, I think we can make that work. But anything more specific than that, I'd need to look at our workload.
Okay, and then the next bullet, the community-based organization selection, that's going to be something that the finance team is going to have to collaborate with on, with other program leaders that have been involved in this work. And I know this one is very important to the board overall.
Okay, thank you for that. My last thing, Mr. Calhoun, Mr. Craven, thank you for that, because you said exactly what I would have expected. There should be some proper budgeting guidelines in place through the use of manuals. So if those things aren't in place, I look forward to seeing what you come up with as far as guidelines in the form of a manual and standard operating procedures, because that's essential, basic, but essential. And then my final question is, Ms. Carlin, and I'm just going to ask this question of you. about Object Code 127, because that's been very concerning to me. Would it not be easier just to disband that object code and place the funds where they need to be?
That is one of the options we're actually looking at. So without committing to that, it's something that we're looking at. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. I'm done, Mr. Calhoun.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Grabowski.
Yeah. And still, I think this goes back to Ms. Carlin, you know, when we set up this audit, and I see that, you know, obviously, Austin, you know, you were reviewing the federal guidelines, and I'm still really kind of concerned and confused, you know, about this community-based organization. Not only in the concerns with the, you know, account 127 that Ms. Roberson has brought up and has brought up, you know, on numerous occasions, but I'm kind of dumbfounded that, okay, we've got a scorecard on the selection. We only really have about 9 months of this program left. Yet we've been ongoing. It's ongoing for what, 2 to 3 years almost. I feel really uneasy that we didn't look into what this community-based organizations are reporting to us as to how they've been spending all of this money. I know we're doing these impact studies, but this impact study to me is something totally different than from going in and saying, okay, I gave you this money. Did you spend this money, and how did you spend this money? Because I think the federal guidelines were pretty clear that we had to have something in there. And so, you know, Ms. Carlin, this may not be your department, but is there, what am I missing here? I mean, am I being overly concerned about something? And Austin, as an auditor, am I missing something here as to why we didn't go into what the community-based organizations did with the money?
So yeah, I could start first. So while we didn't separate out expenditures paid to CBOs, that was involved in the, if we can go back a couple slides just to the, I think it's 2 before, yeah, this one. So within the expenses and the samples that were selected, we did hone in on, you know, professional services, contractor usage, some of those expenses that would have been included within these CBO expenses. So while it wasn't technically called out as a separate item or test within our procedures, we definitely honed in on some of those expenditures that would have been one-offs or, you know, potentially large sum expenditures to these CBOs. So that was part of our judgmental sampling. But yeah, I agree.
Why did you do that? I mean, you honed into it. It falls into, how did it fall into your judgmental report?
So we could see within the expenditures, the vendors that were paid, the category of those services, and understanding that professional services are typically higher risk. So we honed in on those types of expenses as part of our sampling. There's information within the evidence provided that allowed us to make a judgment call as to which expenses to sample and request additional documentation for.
So going into the specific, so you were looking more as to a procurement code exemption or a procurement code expenses. I'm trying to understand why you would look at these large expenditures rather than saying that this should have been something that the district should be doing now and saying, hey, you know, show us how you're spending the money and, you know, are you spending it correctly? I know we're going to be getting this impact, but this just seems to be apples and oranges, this impact study versus what standard accounting would require when you give a vendor a substantial amount of federal money and there's nothing to prove, and we are on the hook. We are the ones responsible since we distributed the federal money to these CBOs. I mean, I would have thought this would have sparked a huge red flag somewhere. And Ms. Carlin, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this one, but I feel very uneasy in reading this report and then seeing that the biggest chunk of our concern hasn't been addressed.
So yeah, one more point on that. If we look at the bullet for alignment of Esser usage to established categories, so we did, again, we didn't specifically carve out the CBO expenditures to test, but I would say a large portion of those, 40 to 50% of our transactions that we tested would have fell within that CBO expenditure bucket. And we were looking at, the types of expenses and how they were categorized within the system. That doesn't mean that we were looking at the actual invoices necessarily and tracing those back to the vendor contracts. That was, outside of the scope of what we had. We had limited budget and limited scope to perform our procedures. So, I'm confident that we did do a portion of that through our expenditure review to trace back to supporting documentation. Again, looking at invoices, looking at how they were coded, and tracing that to the allowable categories of Esser. But I do agree that we did not carve out the CBO expenses separately as a test.
And I think this goes to Ms. Carlin. I know you can only put in, and I've always felt very confident that whatever information staff was providing you, you accurately reported. So that has never been my concern. My concern is that we have yet to have somebody that was, I've been yet to be told who's responsible for overseeing that these CBOs are actually doing what they were supposed to be doing. I know we're going to be seeing this impact study, but it just seems like we've been doing this for an awful long time, and you've been receiving numbers from somebody, and it's been categorized. So I know we know, how we've monitored and we've put it into a category, but where is the protection or the oversight that this information is actually true? Or are we just relying on these CBOs to be saying, this is what we did, and, under the federal guidelines, so be it. We're not going to go check up, or, I just can't. I've been involved in too many federal grants and had too many audits on me in which they have said, did you actually, when you gave that money to somebody, did you make sure that they spent the money? And I'm not seeing it here. Am I missing that?
I'm not sure how to answer that question. Unfortunately, finance was not involved in any of the CBO selections or any of that process. So I'm a little bit green when it comes to answering questions about that specific category.
Well, who is responsible for this? Because this is like the person we've been asking for almost a year. I understand, Ms. Carlin. You are getting information from somebody. Who is that person that is providing all this information, or what department is providing that information?
So the information are you talking about on the monthly Esser report that I give to the Audit and Finance Committee?
Selection.
So that's
that's just a spreadsheet. I get that.
Right. I don't receive any CBO information from other employees inside the district.
But do you know who's responsible for this?
Well, Mr. Cabral, so we got Mr. Kennedy here right now. Did you want to speak to the selection process?
Thank you, Mr. Calhoun.
Yeah. So, Mr. Grabowski, I'm not exactly sure. When you say who's responsible, so the Esser grant, the Esser grants are like any other federal grants, just happen to be the volume or the amount is significantly higher. So I understand the concern there. So if you take a look at the federal the Title I grant, so we have a Title I program manager. So that program manager is responsible for that grant, the Title I. So we have an Esser program manager. Now, any contract, regardless of that the district issues with an outside vendor, regardless of what the funding source is, it could be general operating fund, it could be the Esser funds, Title I, whatever the funding is, there's someone that's responsible in the district that has responsibility to make sure that the contract is executed. And so when a vendor submits an invoice, there's a process through the accounts payable and procurement process where the person, the department who's responsible for managing that specific contract has to attest through our Munis financial system that that department received the goods and services that we contracted for. So that process is no different for Esser than any other funding source that we have in the district. Again, the volume over the last 2 years, 2.5 years, may have been significantly greater, but the process has been the same.
And I appreciate that, Mr. Kennedy, and I think that was well, laid out as to the process. I just think that, and I appreciate the work that the audit and recommendations that the audit has made, even though we're only got 9 months left on this selection. It just seems, I don't feel comfortable based upon what I've been told and heard or seen. And all I see is these sheets, these spreadsheets that says this is going out. And while it may seem like it's a large volume, it's true, but the number of vendors that are actually receiving this money is not that big. So I don't know if this is an audit and finance issue, or this may be even a bigger issue that the board has to get involved in proving that these community-based organizations have been actually spending the money the way they're supposed to be spending the money. I don't know. I don't know, because obviously, all we did was say, yes, we received this federal money. We know where it went, and this is how we've classified it. But, to actually say that's actually true, we're relying on somebody else's, somebody else who I've never heard from say that, yes, I went and checked, I went and did this. And yeah, I agree this may be outside the audit, but that is my concern, Mr. Kennedy and Ms. Carla. Otherwise, I don't have any question that finance has not done a really great job in, putting out these numbers with these few limitations that the audit's pulled in. So I'm done. Thank you, Mr. Cohen.
Well, I would like to respond. So if I understand the scope of the audit, as the auditor has just explained, and I have not been involved in the audit, so I'm just going on what I've heard this afternoon. So there's concerns about the selection of the CBOs in terms of the rubric. So yes, there was a rubric in terms of a scoring, and there's some documentation. I haven't tried to dig that up. So, and the auditor has expressed finding and given a set of recommendations that I've heard staff say that they're going to follow through on, which they will. And by the way, in terms of responding to timelines, typically what we do, and I'm assuming this is what will happen here, once the staff finalizes the corrective action plan to bring to the Audit and Finance Committee, that those each individual steps would have accompanied with it a timeline or dates of those things to be accomplished. So I expect that you'll see that. And then what I also heard the auditor say was that in his sample size, in the firm's sample size, there was maybe 40 to 50% of the sample size that was actually CBOs, and that they did, in fact, trace those expenditures, the contracts, back to the allowable categories that the federal grant allows. So I didn't see where there was any issues about the expenditures themselves being aligned to what the purpose of the federal grant was.
Yeah, but I agree with you, Mr. Kennedy. Based upon what the auditors were provided and based upon their scope, I wouldn't. I'm happy to hear that they looked at some. It just seems that this is such a huge part of overseeing federal distributed money from one party to a third party. I'm not seeing the protections or procedures in place that make me feel fuzzy warm that, if I'm asked by the federal government that I know that every penny was spent correctly, that I can answer that correctly, because I don't see how you can based upon what I've seen. But
Ms. Hawkins.
Yeah, Mr. Rossi, if I may, Mr. Chairman, Ms. Carroll would like to speak. I totally understand what you're saying, but maybe the acting superintendent will to step, because the audit, the financial part seems to be in place according to the audit. What you're asking for is to see outcomes, the measured outcomes from the resources that were allocated to these CBOs. That's what we've not seen as a board. And so someone probably other than finance needs to speak to the.
Right, and Ms. Robertson, I think you're absolutely correct. I just think that this would have been an ongoing process. And I'm glad to see that the numbers, are as to the audit have lined up. But anyway, I don't want to beat this into the ground, but I think you're right. That's a good assessment.
All right, well, Ms. Huggins, and then we're gonna move to Mr. Duke.
Thank you, Mr. Kaplan. Briefly, one, Mr. Grabowski, unfortunately, neither John Cobb nor Steve Hamer could be here today with us. Although we had requested such, they were out of the office. Hopefully they will be able to be available on Monday at the board meeting and the committee of the whole so that they can answer any questions. Most of the CBOs, as you know, were allocated as part of Esser 3, and Mr. Cobb has assisted with a lot of that work. Number two, in regards to CBOs that either schools, my understanding is that the CBO process transitioned from a more centralized process, which might have been the original intent of the superintendent at the time, to more of a school-based initiative whereby through their Esser 3 proposals, schools could request the support of CBOs. So any CBOs moving forward, Mr. Grabowski, Mrs. Roberson, and others, that the district might want to continue their services with their services, an impact report will be completed on how they've performed, what they've done, and the impact they've had on student achievement. Again, we will do our best to either ask Mr. Cobb and Mr. Hamer to respond to some of these things in a proactive attempt on Monday during this part of the presentation, and or we will be prepared, Mrs. Simmons and I, to respond to questions after we consult with them.
All right, Mr. Duke.
I'm good. I have no questions.
All right, we'll move to the room. Yeah.
Audit. Could we just briefly, if we can go back to that same slide again that outlines the findings? And this is maybe starting with Jackie, but open to others to chiming in. Can you just give us a sense of the potential consequences or ramifications of these items today, presuming, as I do, that your remediation plan will be put in place over time and these things will be corrected? But what are the results, or what are there negative ramifications? I can kind of understand the first one, that we have everything's accounted for properly. We're just it would move from different accounts, from that more general account to specific schools. Other than internal understanding, information being more clear, I'm not perceiving there to be any sort of external or financial consequence to that finding. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so I think there is potential to be out of compliance with federal requirements, both with that finding and procurement exemption finding, which again is being addressed. But I think that would be the risk. I'm not saying that is something that will absolutely come to fruition, but anytime we're talking about federal funds and, potential monitoring concerns, there is a risk of those funds being pooled in future years if corrective actions aren't put into place.
But the consequence would be if there was a concern about in the future, they might pull those types of fundings in the future, right? There's not a retroactive concern.
They've already got.
Correct. Yes. If the federal, there's to be a federal audit over this process and they identified that as a finding, or they determined that to be significant, that would be a risk.
Thank you.
All right. With my questions, I have most of my questions already answered. I'm not really concerned about recreating a timeline about what happened with the CBOs at this point. What is really important is that as we're moving forward, we're looking at the stabilization, we have to know what happened then so we can know where we're going to move forward and who's going to get funding as we try to stabilize this thing. That is the most important thing. We can figure everything else out later. As far as 127, we're doing that over all the accounts as opposed to just with the Esser. It's going to be.
Yes, that's a good point. I did not point that out earlier, but yes,
Mm-hmm.
all funds.
Okay. And as far as with the PCAR, you said the PCAR administrator, we're getting somebody on over the next couple of weeks, and we don't currently have a manual about P-card usage or any type of a manual or any type of guidelines of our P-card usage.
No, we have a manual that's dated 2016. It just needs to be revised. So it's time to revise it anyway. So I already had it on my list of revisions before we encountered this. And it's just a matter of, okay, it's just with the federal requirements, just making sure it's added to that manual. So we do have a manual. We have standard operating procedures in place. It's just making sure that those are current and in place, referencing these federal requirements.
Okay. And my final question for Austin, as you asked you this, as I asked with any other audit, he did not find anything egregious within this audit that's going to put us in immediate risk or danger at this point.
Yeah, so as an auditor, I have to be careful how I word this, but that is correct. At least no findings that have not already been or have started to be addressed, such as the exemption finding, I think is significant. But I know there's already plans in place, and I've been in many discussions with Mr. Craven about the procedures and the discussions that are being had with the state on that. I would say that would definitely be the most substantial if that weren't already being addressed, but yes.
All right, I appreciate you. And I guess at this point, we can move forward to 2B to the Esser update. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So moving forward, I won't go through Esser 1 and Esser 2 reporting because those have already been spent, finalized, and reconciled. So I'll just go over the Esser 3 summary. This one is dated through October 31st and includes the spending plan reallocations for the bonus. So if you had been paying attention to the spending plans, you probably noticed that there were increases and decreases across, significant, or excuse me, several categories. So actual fiscal year 24 to date spent is $16.5 million. And we have encumbered approximately $27.6 million. And remaining left to be spent is just a little bit under $40 million. One of the things we're looking at doing right now is we recently had an amendment that was approved by the State Department. And so staff is going in and making sure that amendment aligns with the budgets that are set up in Munis right now in Esser 3. And then the next thing we will be doing is looking for the other part of the $2,500 teacher bonus, because we're already hearing that, that teachers are wanting to know when they're going to receive that next. So that's our next tackle over the next, probably the next 30 days. And so
Quick question
any
before you
questions
finish.
with that?
Will there be will another amendment have to go through, or did we file the first one?
Yes, another amendment will have to go through. Somebody had asked me that not too long ago, and I said no, but I did not realize that when we did this recent amendment, we only captured the $2,500 bonus. So we've built time into our calendar to do that as well when we come back from Christmas break. So.
All right, we will move to questions. Ms. Roberson.
Thank you. Ms. Collin, it seems as though when the reimbursement process and procedure, when the federal government first started Esser 1, they were a little lenient in reimbursing because they were just getting started. Then a little more stronger on Esser 2 reimbursement. How do we look as a district for receiving 100% of our reimbursement for Esser 3? Because it seems like the requirements are becoming a little more stringent. And outside of the audit, we may fare okay with an internal audit, but that's different than putting the district at risk for reimbursement. How do we look? Can you speak to how do we look as far as receiving all of our monies back for Esser 3s?
I need to converse with staff for just one moment on something. Give me a moment, please. So to date, we have not received any issues with our claims to date. I believe what you might be touching on is the most recent procurement exemptions that we had been using when we realized that we had not been using those correctly. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
Okay, so we have so far filed claims for the ones that we have done, and we have not received any rejections or denials on that. One of the things that we're currently doing is working with schools to make sure that those non-competitive requests, meaning it's a request to non-compete a particular vendor because of a certain service that they provide. We, Jeffrey Craven and the procurement team are working with not only central office staff, but principals to get those forms completed and sent to the State Department. And so, but to date, we have not run into any issues with filing claims and being reimbursed for claims or being reimbursed for what we've already spent in Esser funding.
Thank you. I have no more questions.
Thank you, Mr. Grabowski.
Yeah, Ms. Carlin, and I think that's really it's just a follow-up. So as I understand it from Mr. Craven, that going forward now, whenever we spend ESSER funds, we're using a competitive bid process.
So the guidelines that we follow for ESSER and any federal funds going forward is the 2 CFR 200.319 and 320. And that's the regulation that dictates how we use federal funds. So the way we are moving forward is to follow those guidelines, one of which there's 5 exemptions for that code. One's below the threshold. Another one is a sole sourced emergency or getting approval from the subgrantor, which would be the state. So that rule number 4 is our current process that we've been working with the state on to get these forms approved. If anything is a true sole source, we can dictate that as such and go ahead and procure it non-competitively. If it's below the threshold, it's fine. And then if it does not meet any of those criteria, it has to go through the competitive bid process. And that's the way we're moving forward.
Thank you. I have no more further questions.
All right. Do we have any other further questions, Mr. Duke?
No, I'm good.
All right. We will move forward to our action items for today, which will be 3A, which we actually did under 2D. So we'll move forward to 3B, the purchases and contracts greater than $250,000. Mr. Barrowe. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, welcome back. Mr. Craven.
So for this month's 250K list, we have 12 items. Most of them are in either capital programs or facilities management for a total of almost $66.7 million. So with that, I'll open up for questions from anyone regarding the 250K list.
All right, we'll go in the same order. Ms. Robertson.
Okay, I'm sorry. Mr. Craven, I don't have the list in front of me, so I will have to get back with you on any questions that I have regarding this particular list. But I do have one general question. Again, before you came on board, I have voiced my concern about this particular way of reporting the 250K contracts. Do you find this method of reporting to be best practice, or is there another way that we could do this?
And to answer that question, really, whoever the audience is, like that's how we have the information. We have more information. It's really what is the audience, the committee, what do they want to see? So really would be a conversation on Mr. Calhoun, Mr. Grabowski, and yourself and any other committee members. What do you want to see on a monthly basis? The 250K is not something that is up for negotiation, but it's what is the information that you guys would like to see? I'm open to modifying this however is needed. Whatever guidance you guys would like. And if that's a separate conversation on a separate time, then we can do that as such.
Thank you. And I definitely would welcome that conversation, Mr. Kurowski and Mr. Calhoun. I have no further questions.
Thank you. We'll get that set up. Mr. Grabowski.
I only have the question on item 1, which is the University of Virginia partnership agreement. And the amount's almost $400,000, and it says it's funded by Title II. So I would just like to know a little more about that request. And if it was my understanding, I think when this originally came up, that Esser 3 funds were involved in this. And if that's true, why isn't that not listed under the funding source?
Thank you for that, Mr. Grabowski. It's Anita. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Swearingen and Quinetta White, who are here with any additions that Mrs. Simmons might want to add. The UVA contract, as you may be aware, is about leadership development. They've worked for the last 2.5 years in our acceleration schools. And this year, as the state has identified priority schools, we have started a partnership with UVA to help support leadership development, 90-day plans, data-driven instruction work with the UVA for these additional schools. So I'm going to turn it over to the experts, Dr. Swearingen and Mrs. White, and ask them to speak as they supervise the schools that are, in addition to the acceleration schools, being served by the University of Virginia. You're spot on that to date, Mrs. Belcher, the former CAO, and Mrs. Haynes utilized a majority of Esser funds. Because this contract extends beyond the sunset of Esser. However, we've identified other funds that can be used to support this work as we move forward. So I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. White and Dr. Swearingen. Mrs. White, thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Quinetta White. I'm one of the interim executive directors for the elementary learning community. So in July, 7 principals and approximately 5 district staff members were afforded the opportunity to participate and join the University of Virginia and the partnership for leaders who are leading schools. This opportunity, I want to start with a couple highlights from the 7 principals. This opportunity, one principal states, is hands down the best professional development. Another, most intense yet beneficial training. It challenged me as a leader to look at my practices and the effectiveness and the impact on our students. I have been a principal for over 25 years. I have a renewed vision, systemic way of ensuring accountability. UVA is a game changer. It provides structure and it's a safety net. One other principle states, there are incremental steps towards goals, ensuring that I have focus with the 90-day plan and big rocks. I believe I want to elaborate on the 90-day plan. I was a principal, and I did not have the opportunity to attend UVA as a principal. But what I gained as a leader of principals, a supporter of principals, is that when you have a plan in place, a laser-like focus, incrementally, it keeps you on track. You reflect, you look back, you analyze data, you're accountable. These coaching methods that UVA used with us, it stretched our thinking, yes, but it keeps us focused and accountable. there were 10 acceleration schools. So we're at the infancy stages of this, the 7 transformation schools. The 10 acceleration schools, they are on year 2, going into year 3. And of course, you know the data, how our acceleration schools have increased. However, I want to point out that there were increases in all acceleration schools in their report card rating, if not the report card rating, in student achievement in ELA and mathematics. But specifically, Shakora, 4% to 27% in those 2 years in ELA, 9% to 23% in mathematics. Hunley Park, 25% to 48% in ELA in 2 years, 24% to 47% in mathematics. Goodwin Elementary, 13% to 35% in ELA, 15 to 25% in mathematics. Of course, I can go on and on about the experience with the University of Virginia and how I have learned how to be a better support of school leaders. I am grateful for this opportunity, and I'm hopeful that we will continue. Thank you.
Mr. Grabowski, Dr. Temple also attended a session. I think that perhaps you had planned, but some conflicts arose and you weren't able to travel. I believe Dr. Temple may be on the line. I hate to maybe, unless that's Carol Clark. Dr. Temple, is that you? It is
It's
you.
me.
Yeah, I don't know if
Yes.
you might comment on your experience with UVA when you were able to travel to Charlottesville with Mrs. Haynes and her principals.
Yes, I was there for the conference and worked with the schools. I was very impressed with the kind of work that they were doing, and it was the sessions were informative, but they were also interactive, and the schools were definitely working on plans. It was a wonderful experience to not only be with our own schools, but there were other districts from across the nation that were there. So we had plenty of opportunities to interact with them. One of the things that I thought was really valuable is that we've been concerned about how do we get all of our students opportunities access algebra. And I know that Dr. Jerome Davis and Dr. Jackie Haynes and I spent time working on an action plan that we think can be implemented. So, you know, it takes time to think and plan and talk, and it's very helpful to have skilled people guiding the process and engaging us in very strong professional development ways. So yes, I thoroughly not only enjoyed it, but found it to be a very valuable experience. I wish it was something that when I was a principal, I would have had an opportunity to do. But I think it's also very important that the principal is there with key leaders from the school, and that they really have the time to really concentrate on the school and be under the guidance of professionals.
Thank you.
That's it.
Thank you so much. Mr. Grabowski, we're happy to answer any other questions you might have. Important to know is that we have linked this to one of the strategies that we do believe is positively impacting student achievement. So we'll continue to look at data and link those results. Of course, we can't say UVA is the only thing that has had a positive impact on student achievement, particularly in our acceleration schools, but we do consider it one of the key strategies.
And I appreciate that. I appreciate, Ms. Temple's input and definitely Ms. White's input as to the impact. My only concern, it still goes back to, we've identified this as a Title II funding source. And you know, my position, I always like to see if something's working, how do we make it sustainable and that it can be used by more schools, you know, within our organization. So I always look for something that, you know, is self-replicating, you know, within our own staff. So it really, I guess, Ms. Huggins, it goes back to, you made a mention that a portion of this funding, and I'm assuming had come from Esser in the past, but that you have found it another source to keep this program going. So I'm kind of, is it through Title II funding, or is there something, are you looking at the general operating fund to be, you know, potentially looking at it as we go into the budget year?
A combination of Title II, yes, sir, and Esser. So post Esser sunset, the portion of the cost outside of the sunset of the grant, we confirmed with Sherry Motine and Mrs. Simmons' office that Title II would then be able to pick up and cover those funds beyond Esser 3.
So this would be part of the impact study that we would be looking at in the near future.
It will be, but to be quite frank, Mr. Grabowski, prior to moving this item forward, we've done some studies to ensure that this is a key lever, a key piece of our work that is successful in building school leaders and impacting student achievement. So in doing so is why we bring this forward to the board now for continuation.
But I still go back to you've just got the funding sources Title II. And I just think you need to be a little more clear and open to the board as to, you know, where all the funds are coming from, because they obviously aren't all coming from Title II.
I'll ask Marcia to update that before it goes to the board on Monday. So thank you for bringing it to our attention. Yes, sir.
That's it. I have no further questions, Mr. Collins.
All right, you good, Mr. Craven? All right, we're gonna, before we move forward, Mr. Duke, you have anything? We have anything?
No, I'm good.
Mr. Hartman, I only had one question, and we're gonna get back to Mr. Grabowski's question in a second. Can you talk a little bit more about the regarding number 4, the change order for Burke High School's roof replacement?
Yeah, that's a continuation. That was a 2-year program. So we completed phase 1 in the first year. This is phase 2 for the second year of the program for completion of Burke.
So we're basically staying under the same contract, just adding more to it so they can finish the project?
That's correct.
Correct. To add, I know what Mr. Hartman said, many of our roofs are so large that we can't complete the entire roof in one single summer. So many of the roofing projects are phased over several years. We want to keep the same contractor doing each phase to make sure the roof is seamless between where it goes from phase 1 to 2.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sure.
Yes,
Mr. Calhoun, I appreciate that. Thank you. Mr. Craven, let me know, Mr. Grabowski, that he actually removed Esser 3 from the chart, thankfully, because he and Sherry Modine had a follow-up conversation. Again, she's the director of professional development in Ms. Simmons' office, and she was actually able to utilize all Title II funding for this moving forward. So I was mistaken. We will not use Esser 3 for the UVA line item 1, but instead it will be fully funded out of Title II. And I want to thank Mr. Craven for bringing that to my attention.
Thank you, Mr. Craven. And as long as it fits within Title II. All right, perfect.
Yeah.
Right.
And Mr. Calhoun, if I could just, you know, clarify it. Yeah, that would be wonderful to have that in there. I mean, at least knowing that that's the explanation of it. And well, anyway, that's enough.
All right.
Mr. Calhoun, can I have a follow-up on this, on question number 4 that you asked on the roofing?
The change order? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I just, it says that there's a change. Yes. Does that mean that there's, and Mr. Brewer, I'm just trying to understand the process. So we had the Burke High School roof replacement as into multiple phases. Is there, when you say there's a change, does that mean there was an increase in the price and that we're looking at an increase of $3 million, or was that already budgeted in under the sales tax, you know, phase 5? I'm just trying to, I see the word change and I see yes.
I can explain that. It looks like that column is supposed to say change order, and I believe the word order just got cut off.
Okay, but so
spoke
Mr.
to my
Bro,
question.
So it's a change order to an existing contract.
Right. So that spoke to my question, were they just keeping the same contract and adding to it so they could finish the entire roof as opposed to bidding out for different parts of the roof for different companies or whatnot?
Correct. It's not rebid.
Mhm.
And that Omnia, we've gone through this once before, that Omnia contract is a state contract,
Mhm.
which is, pre-priced
Right.
across the state. So it's a great tool to take advantage of to save time and effort.
thank you.
Okay, but let me jump in on that as well. What constitutes a change order? Let me ask it this way. What's the difference between a change order and an amendment to a contract?
Good question.
Great question. A change order could be you're just changing a task order off of a contract. A modification actually goes back to that base contract. So we, being in an Omnia contract, it can't be an amendment because we don't own that contract. So you would have to amend the entire contract. Doing a change order is more like a change task order. You can cut task orders off of a contract. That's kind of how we work here. We do purchase orders that can be standalone. They can also be used as task orders, using that kind of term, off of one contract, if that makes sense. So it's a change order. It cannot be an amendment in this particular situation, but that's kind of the difference between a change order and an amendment. Is that clear?
Yes, it is. Mr. Craven, I think it would behoove you to, when you have time, to go back and look at some historical documents, because one of the findings that we received as a district when we first came on, there were findings for a lot of change orders. And so when we as a board see a lot of Ys, that's going to be a red flag to us. So we will continue to ask, to make sure that they're legitimate change orders or are they amendments. So that's something that it's a red flag, definitely for me.
Okay, we could be better prepared to answer and have more justification for the change orders in the future.
And that's why I question if this reporting form that we are using is the best practice, the best tool.
Right. So that's something we'll definitely look into over the next couple months, or even having a meeting sooner than later about this 250K list. So moving forward, do we have any other further questions on the 250K list? Hearing none, we're gonna can I get a motion to approve the 250K list as presented?
So moved.
We have a
Second.
motion.
Second.
We have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
We have ayes. Any opposed? It moves forward. All right, we would then move to item 3C, excuse me, to Ms. Foxworth for the annual presentation of our Head Start and Early Head Start FY24 financial report.
Good afternoon, Committee Chair Calhoun, Vice Chair Dunmeyer, the Audit and Finance Committee, and Acting Superintendent Huggins. It's a friendly reminder of why I'm here. As the governing body for the Head Start grant, regulations require you to review and approve monthly financial statements along with credit card expenditures. The way we're doing it, the financial report and credit card statement that has been presented is from September 23 to October 23. So every other month will come and you'll get 2 months worth of statements. So I'm just going to highlight two things. The financial report highlights our current spending to date. Please note that due to our extensive vacancies up till now, that has caused some variance in several line items. I'm going to highlight two. The fringe, based on the current year benefit elections, is higher than we thought. And so that's where there's a difference there. And then other, because we have a lot of vacancies as of right now, the revenue generated due to our vacancies budgeted went to an unobligated item, which is other. We are continuing to hire. We're actually having a job fair on Tuesday. And we're going to have ongoing classroom projects and expenses that continue to come up and staffing needs. So we will make sure those are obligated. We anticipate presenting a budget, the board, a budget amendment probably in January, the next time we're here during our continuation request. And then that will be, once that is approved by you, will go to the Office of Head Start. Any detailed questions I will attempt to answer, or the budget supervisor, Avis Rock.
For this one, we're just going to ask for any questions. I actually have one question. So with the variances, do you have to go through the same amendment process that we will have to go through with Esser, or can you just go ahead and reallocate that money throughout as you see?
You actually have the obligation, once you have a spending plan, to have those unobligated budgets, then you can submit it to the
Okay, perfect. That's all I have.
Okay.
So give it this, no further questions. We would need a motion to approve the June 2023 through October 2023 CCSD Head Start Early Head Start Financial Report and credit card expenditures for September 2023 through October 2023.
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion in the second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? That passes through. We will now move forward to our information items. And yeah, we'll just go ahead and move forward to our information items. The first one would be a 4A, a review of proposed FOIA charges. That'd be Ms. Denny.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Calhoun. So at the Audit and Finance Committee's request, staff has done some research and also gotten a legal opinion, and we've decided that the best fee when compared with our neighboring districts and other municipalities is a $20 an hour flat rate rather than a sliding scale for different people who would be doing the research. And so that's the proposal that we're bringing before the board. We have drafted on our website what that would look like. And so that's available for public viewing. We haven't gotten any feedback about that at this time. And so we're bringing that forth as an information item for a change that we've made on our website and in our FOIA process.
Thank you very much. I have some questions at the end, but we will start with any other questions on this information item. Right. Hearing that, I will only make the statement that this is an internal procedure. That's what y'all come up with. As someone who constantly files FOIAs, I want us to make sure we do respect the fact that if it's for the public good, that fees can and shall be waived. As I said, I don't believe this comes for the board for approval, but this is just an internal procedure that y'all should push through.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Thank you.
Hearing nothing further, we will move forward to item 4B, discussion of 45-day enrollment counts.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay?
We can, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for providing us the time to update you on the current 45-day average daily membership. We have provided a report reflecting historical 45-day counts along with a comparison of last year's 45-day counts and the final average daily membership from prior year's 135. Overall, you will see that there are no major changes in the 45-day count when compared to the prior year 45-day reporting and to our prior year 135-day reporting. Kindergarten through high school are funded at a weighting of 1.0. And we see a 1% or 231 students decrease in this category from prior year 45-day. The count of students in special education funding categories increased by less than 1%, 68 students as well. Students falling into this category are funded at a weighting of 2.6. We did see an increase of 398 vocation students funded at 1.24 weighting. This is an anticipated change as students transition between the high school category and the vocational categories. Add-on waiting category for academic assistance decreased, which is reflective of our improved assessment performance. High achieving increased as well, which is also due to improved test scores. Pupils in poverty decreased, while multilingual learners increased. The dual enrollment category count is provided in this report as informational purposes only, as it is no longer a funding category per the state. The numbers are still marked as preliminary. I just checked on the state's website and they have not finalized their review of the counts. But we do not anticipate any changes in our numbers. And if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions on the 45-day report? Okay, hearing none. And I guess we really need to wait for everything to come open to answer truly my questions that I will have on them. So we will wait for that. Do you have an anticipation of when those numbers will be coming?
So we anticipate this to be our final numbers. It would only be if we initiated a change. They are doing reviews, and I think it's because one of the districts may have had a server issue with PowerSchool for self-hosted. So that district may have changes, but we don't anticipate any for us. So if you have any questions, I can go ahead and answer those. And we would just send forward as an update to the board saying, okay, this is final now.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you for that. And we will move forward to item 4C, the FCO, the fixed cost ownership for 2023 year end.
Mrs. Dangerfield, do you happen to have some slides for this one? I'm breaking with Mr. Grabowski's rule on slides. I apologize, Mr. Grabowski. So this is this presentation is the culmination of essentially 3 years worth of work. At any one time, we're really involved in 3 years of programming. We're now in the final wrap-up stage of the FY23 program here. It began in the fall of 2021 with planning. We came to the board in the spring of 2022 and began executing it in the summer of 2022. I want to thank Stephanie Allen, who works for Joyce Costello, who put these slides together. She represents a great finance team that manages the money for us, and all of the program managers that put these slides in place. But I really want to take the opportunity to thank them for everything they do. And I'm going to highlight just some of the things that they've done with these funds to repair, renovate, and replace items in our school. Right now, we're in the financial stages of the closeout. You can go ahead and flip through the next two slides. And we do believe the FCO supports quality facilities and equipment that support our teachers, our leaders, and wraparound services. The scorecard here is a summary of what we got for FY23. This is broken down by constituent district and by level of school. You can see the numbers of schools affected and the number of projects completed, 607 total across the board. That's about $84,000 per project, leading to the $51 million spent across 13 programs, really more than 13 because IT's got 4 or 5 of them, but we've got multiple program managers that program space across the district, over 1,700 buildings. And this is the list of the type board next week with a plan to eliminate these trailers. We would be able to reutilize them somewhere else, but this is an example of what FCO was used for in 23. Next slide is West Ashley High, the breezeway between the cafeteria and the main building. You can see the replacement and what it looks like now. Excellent project at West Ashley High. A lot of work at Garrett, both for Morningside being there and the fact that we now have operations staff there since we had to close the Fraser campus downtown in preparation of the expansion of Early College High School. We did some paving there for the buses and the equipment at that campus. This is a great project, security vestibule at Baptist Hill. We have 2 that are on that we're just finishing up this year, but this represents the completion of our vestibule program. It provides an extra layer of support for that front office. Visitors have to enter the outside door into this vestibule area, and they have to be buzzed in. So it gives that front office an extra opportunity to slow down anybody that doesn't need to be in the building. Loading dock at Garrett. Again, we had to replace what was going on at Fraser. We have to offload equipment from trucks into the Garrett complex. This was a very good project to support that facility management operation. Next program under Mr. Hamer is playgrounds. We like to keep this one separate, 1.35 million. We replaced playgrounds, the 5 to 12-year-olds, as well as the little kid playgrounds. You can see here the examples of the playgrounds that were replaced this past year. The turf has become really an institution here that was piloted about 7 years ago. It's about $200,000 per playground, and we get 10 to 15 years service life out of each one. My favorite class in the day. All right, security emergency management, 2.56 million. This is under Mr. Reidenbach. A brunt of his program is to replace camera systems on a 10-year cycle. We took care of 14 systems across the district, also replacing cameras, adding cameras where needed. We now have 8,400 cameras keeping an eye on things across the district. The next slide, other things that Mr. Reidenbach takes care of. The public safety radio enhancement system is a pretty substantial program. This is to provide communication for our emergency responders within our schools. We replaced 3 systems in this given year, Wando, North Charleston High, and St. John's. We also replaced radios in our schools, as well as some of the server hardware for fire panels, and adding to the ALAR system, which gives our first responders an opportunity to see our cameras live in our schools. I mentioned that several programs in IT. This one first one demonstrates the mobile devices that are purchased with FCO money, more than 8,000 of them for 23 schools in this year. Replacing end-of-year technology is the next slide. Everything from the digital signs outside the school into the school with sound systems, conference room upgrades, et cetera. This is $4.8 million and the largest of our IT programs. Mr. Naraki handles all of these. He also handles the computer labs and staff. You can see the work done here with computer labs. And finally, service and support. His team does a phenomenal job with responding to the needs of our schools. You can see the number of requests for service and the satisfaction rating that he has achieved with this program. And last but not least in IT is network operations, uninterrupted power supplies, network electronics, the public address systems that are school-based, as well as the network systems are all tapped into this program, 2.135 million for network operations. Moving on to media modernization, Christy James and Learning Services, the program manager, a little over $1 million program. She upgrades library books, both digital and hard copies in our libraries. That's a big portion of the funding that she gets. Next slide. And then the next slide. She also handles the furniture for our media centers, $325,000 in this program year. We line up our carpeting and painting replacements to be done at the same time so that we've got a full refresh of our media centers when she's ready to replace furniture in each of these. You see some examples here, Military Magnet Academy, North Charleston High School, and then finally, also under media is the equipment that our media specialists or our librarians use. We replace that equipment as well as handle the performance licenses that protect the information from copyright violations with her program. Deb Luce manages the furniture and fixtures and equipment program, 1.57 million, over 600 requests to replace items ranging from everything from cafeteria furniture to stage curtains to picnic tables for lunch outside at schools. This is a very useful and helpful program. The next slide shows where we replaced the seating in the School of the Arts auditorium that was well beyond its service life, but is looking brand new these days because of the seating there. Front office equipment, before and after shot. I don't know about that sofa. I know I didn't buy that thing years ago, but schools cobble together and make do with what they can on occasion. But we got that rascal gone. I'm sure it's out on a street corner somewhere. Fine arts, Shelley Gonauer handles the band equipment and orchestra equipment at our schools. You can see the 20 schools listed on this table where she replaces and adds to the inventory based on the needs of each of these schools. A couple of photos, saxophones and tubas, and string basses and percussion. Athletics program, Trevor Strotterman is our athletic director. we look at safety first and replacing and refurbishing football helmets is the top priority. But then he breaks out the rest of the projects based on school needs. You can see some of the work that was done this past year in athletics. Current technology, Rich Gordon is a program manager. Much of this program is executed by Steve Hamer in facilities. The highlight of this year was culinary arts implementation, new facility, portion of a facility at Military Magnet High School. We closed out that project and it's fully operational. Planning and real estate, Ms. Barnett handles all of the high school auditoriums. You can see the list of work that she's done there. 7 auditoriums were touched this past year. She also handles the district-wide stadiums with this program. Transportation, Mr. Lynch, a little over $1 million, focused on replacing cameras and digital recorders in our bus fleet, as well as replacing the activity buses and keeping those up to speed. We've got 59 buses in the fleet. Right now, the average age is a little over 11 years. And so far, we believe we're meeting the demand signals of our high schools with that. And the last 2 programs, nutrition services, $1.2 million. Walter Campbell's been able to upgrade serving lines at our schools, providing a much better presentation for the great food offered by nutrition services. There's a couple of slides showing some pictures of our cafeteria equipment that's been purchased with these funds. And last but not least, nursing services. This is the second year that Ellen Nitz has equipment in this program. She used it to buy the vital sign monitors for each of our schools, as well as the immunization van, which allows us to maintain compliance with South Carolina immunization laws. Has been highly successful, and also replacing and adding to our AED usage in schools, which has actually been proven to be lifesavers. We've had to use 2 of them in the last several years, and has really made a difference. And you can see the last picture is that immunization van and one of our boxes that you'll see in schools today with the new AED, as well as the medication equipment in the top box there. So that summarizes a lot of work and a lot of effort by a lot of people. I'd like to thank the board for their support of this program, and we'll be bringing forward the FY25 program in February. Subject to your questions, that completes the brief.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions for Mr. Barowie?
I have a clarification, Mr. Calhoun. Mr. Barowie, that was an excellent presentation. A lot of pictures. I think it really shows a very good wide variety. And I kind of have to take my hat off to you because I don't think you could have done it in any less slides than showing such a great
Wait a minute, Mr.
explanation.
Grabowski, that was 39 slides. Come on.
I know, but if you notice his rhythm, he got into a rhythm and he was cranking
Stop
in
right
and
there.
at about 5 to 10 seconds. And it was just like you could almost get that thing under an appellate 5-minute rule, thing. So I do, I think there are going to have to be exceptions to some of my things, and I'm a big man to admit it. But
please note that for the record, Ms. Dangerfield.
yeah, that was, well, Miss Carlin will tell you, I make my, that was a very good presentation, and I'm pretty impressed with all of the things that your department has to fix. And it just really, it's just, okay.
Thank you. Any further questions, comments, concerns, prayers, thoughts? Thank you, Mr. Barowie. We will move forward to our monthly capital projects report. Hello.
Hello.
Good day.
Good afternoon, Mr. Calhoun, committee members, and Acting Superintendent Huggins. I'd like to present the October capital projects report. Our revenues and collections for the 9th month, I'm happy and excited to report we're $270,000 above our cash flow projections based on the most recent collections, with 2% growth over the prior year. The October expenditures are as follows. For the 2010 through 2016 program, $20,000. The 2017 through 2022 program, $1.7 million. The 2023 through 2028 program, $7.2 million. The 2023 through 2028 long-term debt program, $408,000. As Mr. Barowie has just presented, we are recapping fixed cost of ownership 23 today. 24 obviously has commenced, and not only will we be bringing the fixed cost of ownership fiscal year 25 list to you in February, we will also bring the funding source to you at that time too in February. I'm happy to answer any questions.
That was good news. Do we have any questions? Hearing none,
I have one, Mr. Calhoun.
Go ahead.
Ms. Casella, I agree with Mr. Calhoun. It's really nice to hear that we were 270,000 above our projections. On a running count, do you have how far we're lagging behind the initial projections? This obviously sends us in the right direction of getting to above zero.
You know what? I actually forgot that data today, but if I recall, we were about 750,000 below the projections. So with this increase of about 270, we're probably still trending about 500,000 below. I can confirm that number for you.
And this would be attested to a strong September.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, these numbers would go back to into our September revenue generating areas, but that's good news. It is very good.
I'm sorry, those are September collections. Yes, I had to think about it because we're notified about 2 months afterwards.
Excellent. Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for that. I would appreciate it. We're going to go ahead and move forward to 4E, constituent board pay.
Thank you. So on October 9th, the board had approved a motion to have the Audit and Finance Committee add constituent board pay for discussion at an upcoming meeting that would be included in the FY25 budget. So there are 3 recommendations that also include fringe benefits. The first one is a hourly rate of $35 per hour with an annual projected cost of approximately $116,000. The second recommendation is $40 per hour with an annual projected cost of $128,000. And then the third option is a $225 per month flat rate with an annual projected cost of $215,000. These numbers also, or excuse me, these recommendations also include a projected cost of $30,166 for Chromebooks, and a projected cost of $4,425, or if you break it down, $6 per diem for meals at each meeting. So this is being presented as an information item. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know.
Yes, I do, but I will wait till the end. Ms. Roberson or Mr. Grabowski?
I would like to hear your comments first, Mr. Calhoun, with your experience.
Yes.
I've been inundated with this one, but I would love to hear your comments.
Well, my first with the question, as far as like even with the 30,000 expenditure for the Chromebooks, as of right now, the constituent boards, they have iPads.
Mr. Barowie, can you confirm if they have iPads or Chromebooks?
We have
I'm
iPads.
not sure.
So only D10 had the iPads?
I just saw D4 and they were Chromebooks, so is that it?
D10, D4, and
D4 had Chromebooks.
D4 had Chromebooks. So if they already had the Chromebooks over in D4.
So they're not issued permanently.
Right. Even with these that we have here, they're not issued permanently, but we're going to, with the number that we have for the Chromebooks, we're just going to buy all the constituent board Chromebooks.
It's a total of 55.
All right. And so the ones that they already have, those will go back into the system.
The service life is only 4 to 5 years for those. So
yeah, we just got them last year. we just got those things. We've been asking for a while. And I'm saying we at this point because although I'm D6, I will always be D10 constituent board. Now, I appreciate us bringing together these numbers. I do feel as if as an audit and finance committee, we need to put together an ad hoc committee that comprise of constituent board members and people who actually sit through these meetings, so they can actually tell us what they feel as if they need, be it one of these selections, or if they feel as if they're being slotted somewhere else, or that we don't need this much. I feel as we have to have somebody who actually attends these meetings, be it the staff who are there for the 5 hours that we're there, the constituent board members, it could be the chairs or whoever their designated liaison will be, but they need to be brought in this on the front end so they can tell us what we need to tell the legislator to send out. Thoughts?
Mr. Calhoun, I agree with you 100% on that. And one of my concerns with how these reports are putting together is actually the first on the far left, showing the monthly meetings, average lengths of meetings, and number of members. So I think the ad hoc committee would be a great source of trying to figure out how we're going to find an equitable solution to this, because that's why when I was looking at the flat rate, I really had a hard time with that when I would go to the far left. And then you also run the problem when you go the cost per member on a cost per hour type of situation. Suddenly, not that I think anybody wants to attend a meeting longer than they have to, but it is one of those things. So I think you're spot on with an ad hoc and getting just a little more information before we make this, this or present it to the board.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Have we compared this to what other districts give their members?
We're the only one that has constituent boards.
All right, so then it's harder to compare then.
At this point, I would say it will need to be compared to any other duly elected official who is not receiving any type of pay, and what their time would be given towards that position that they have. We always have to remember constituent board members are elected officials on the ballot. So we have to look at any other elected official who's not receiving any type of salary or stipend, but then also are putting in the 10, 15 hours, or even looking at the 40 hours a month towards their elected position.
Yeah, and I agree, with you, Mr. Calhoun, 100%. And if not an ad hoc committee, if that's, if we find that to be difficult to put together, at least a survey to all of the constituent board members to get their input before it comes to the board. We at least need to get some feedback from them before we start making a decision for and about them, because they are respected elected officials as well. So I do agree with you. Ad hoc committee, or at least a survey from all of the members to get their input.
Michael, good.
I agree with those ideas and those thoughts as well too. I think there needs to be more data given as to what's reasonable and what's needed from them versus just kind of making a blanket decision.
And this is jumping ahead, but a point of clarification. We've got fringe benefits. Are there fringe benefits associated with those positions? So
with as of right now, there are with ours. So I'm believing after they hit a certain amount, they will have to get the fringe benefits as well.
I'm sorry, say that again. I was looking at something.
With the, I know as a consolidated board member, ours come with fringe benefits, So with us, with them receiving some type of salary or stipend or higher stipend, they would trigger the amount where they would have to get fringe benefits as well.
I have not taken this to HR to discuss how that would be handled from a payroll perspective. I haven't discussed this with HR and payroll, but I can look into that and follow up. But I imagine we would handle them the same way as we handle the board of trustees.
Right, because at this moment, they're not considered employees, or they don't receive the same, they don't receive funding the same way that we would, to where things are coming out. It's just a straight stipend. That's given out, which I believe right now is $25 a meeting. Yeah, $25 a meeting. So this is definitely important for us to look at. Would y'all want to go the survey route or the ad hoc committee route? Talking to committee members.
mean, the survey would probably go a lot quicker than getting a committee together.
I think maybe getting a couple of people, whether it's a committee or something, to hash through some of these questions to get some of the details ironed out before we come back together makes sense. I don't know if that's an official committee or not, but something to even to put the survey together, to review the results, some small group.
So I actually think we could put that together for January to be represented back in February. Because January, we're coming directly back onto January 3rd. So we won't have no time at all. Y'all won't be able to find me. So so yes, I think that's something we could pull together, either with all the chairs from each of the constituent boards, or somebody designated to represent their constituent boards, and start trying to pull something together for that. If we're looking at a timeline at this point, if we pull January to meet with everyone, February we can bring back what they came up with to see if we're going to how we can develop a survey. March coming together with the options that we have, or whatever they come up with as well. And then April, we're looking to send something up to Columbia, or send it over to the board and send it up to Columbia. As we all know, this is not our decision whether we could pay constituent boards. This is a General Assembly. This is a General Assembly's decision. We can only advocate for it at this point. So, any other questions, thoughts, concerns?
So I just have a question, just so we know what to do. So am I hearing that you're going to chair this and you're going to work with the other constituent chairs? Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, I will put something else on my plate, but I will absolutely. I've been advocating for this since 2018. After seeing how much work goes into being on a constituent board, and what people don't realize is that the constituent board members, they're usually the first line of defense that parents and the community members come to before they even call. It's like after I got off a constituent board, they forgot my number. Like, I'm still here, but now they go to somebody else who's on the constituent board. So there's a lot of responsibility, particularly within that last line of looking at the well-being of the district, and they deserve it at this point. So yeah, we're gonna definitely move forward and try to pull something together for February, March, and April.
And Mr. Cowan, I like your timeline. I think that's good. I think we need to get that in writing. And I just think every board member, when they consider, I mean, this obviously goes up to the state, but if we didn't have the constituents board, I just can't imagine how much time we would be spending trying to deal with it. So, but I think the timeline that you put forth is a good timeline. I think we just need to get it writing, and that may be something that we should, or the audit finance should just come out and say, look, this is the proposed timeline of what's happening. Then I think it also helps staff understand, the direction we're going. But I think it's a good timeline.
Absolutely, but I do appreciate the proposal that was put together, the options that were put together, because it gives us a baseline of where we can start at. All right, thank you. We're going to move forward to our monthly financial report. Ms. Carla.
Thank you. So for the month of October, for the month of September, October, and November, what we normally do is compare current year expenditures to prior year expenditures, as well as revenues. We will start the the year-to-date financial report on the December financial update, which will be presented in February. So, but when you look at revenues this year compared to last year, we are up about $5.4 million. And that's mostly due to the timing of receiving local property tax revenues. We're receiving them sooner this year than we did last year. On expenditures, we have spent approximately $18.6 million more at this time of year compared to last year. As usual, that's mostly due to payroll expenditures for salaries and benefits. And if you recall, that was due to teacher salary increase of $5,000 plus a step increase, as well as the 2.5% plus a step increase for classified staff and administrators. We're up a little bit with purchase services by about $3.5 million. but that's mostly due to the increase in the cleaning services contract that we had in the middle of last year, as well as we are receiving first student invoices sooner this year than before. But other than that, we are in line with revenues and expenditures, and we are not seeing anything that is concerning at this point.
Thank you. Do we have any questions?
Yeah, I have a general question. How are we doing with keeping our teachers in seats? You know, we've tried to adjust compensation. Are we doing any better with holding our staffing, teachers and staff really?
I do not believe Bill is here, and I'm not sure, but I can find out and follow up. Anita, do you have any idea?
We are doing better, but we need to get with Bill. He went out to meet with the staff this afternoon, so we'll have that prepared and share it with you. Thank you.
Which is great news, and I'm excited. I hope that's the way it holds out, but it also might lead to less cushion. You know, that's been a source of offset for any overruns we have elsewhere.
Yes,
we may
yes,
not
sir.
get that this year.
Yes, sir.
It's an odd thing to root for them. But
I know.
Yeah, I think that's something we should get at that board update as well. Try to look at our retention so far. Ms. Dunmeyer. I'm sorry, Ms. Roberson.
It's okay. I have a general question as well. Is the auditor still in the room?
Yep, I just looked at her. Yes, awesome.
Oh, okay. What's your professional opinion on how could we fix getting reports that's like 30 days behind?
Hey, good afternoon again. Can you please be a little bit more specific in terms of reporting? I just came on board recently for the Esser internal audit. We're discussing further internal audits, but potentially lacking information.
Ms.
Yeah,
Roberson,
like go ahead.
you want me to explain to him what you're asking?
Yes, please. Yes, because I'm driving now. Thank you, Ms.
No,
Carlin.
you're fine. So the concern has always been, here we are, we're in December, and we're just now reporting the October report, even though it was completed, around November 20th. And there's a couple reasons why. The biggest reason is sometimes we don't have all the revenues in the right spot, and we'll receive money sometimes and we're not sure where it needs to be recorded. And so we're working with the State Department and other entities to try to figure out where this needs to be recorded properly. Another problem we run into is sometimes the P card file, we don't post P cards but once a month. And sometimes we don't get that until somewhere between the 15th and the 20th. And so there's that delay. I mean, we could certainly produce a report, but it would have to be draft. It wouldn't be complete. So I'm not sure which is the best way. Obviously, if I knew there was a problem, I would alert the appropriate people immediately. I wouldn't wait, 45, 50, 60 days after the fact. But I've been in this position, I've been in, the executive director of finance. Well, I've been with the district, but I've been back 6 years, and this is how I've always done it. Not saying it's the right way, but I can't figure out a better way to do it because of the timing of some transactions that we're waiting on.
Right. Yeah. So it sounds like there's a lot of factors at play. I think, at the end of the day, this would be something that an internal audit function or some sort of internal review function would look at the financial close process. These are the types of activities or the scope of that type of review. Again, whether it's internally at the district or whoever's performing it, but that would be my thought if we really wanted to dig into potential efficiencies and ways to turn things around quicker, whether there's that P card report or any of the other obstacles that we're facing for the timing. We would just really need to dig into that and see what is causing these delays and are we able to reasonably remediate them.
Or
Ms. Roberson, does that help?
Yes, that does. And that's something that I'm very much interested in, efficiencies, because I think that that's a big part of us as a board providing effective oversight. Thank you.
Thank you. And I believe Mr. Kennedy has some he wanted to add.
I do have a comment on that. So I think one of the biggest, I'm not sure I'll call it obstacle, but perhaps I will. So the day is, we have the Audit and Finance Committee meeting today, which is December 5th. which is always the first Tuesday. The month closed for November 30, which is just a few days ago. And so transactionally, the staff has to close the books, produces the report. And so there's no way, given 4 or 5 days before the Audit and Finance Committee, after the board, the month has closed, that we can produce, I don't think, a set of financials. So that is the biggest drawback that I've seen in my time here.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I think that's something that we should look into, Mr. Kennedy, with the internal audit. How do we fix that? How do we move past that obstacle?
Well, I don't think it's very common to have a close shorter than a week or so for organizations. I mean, even very large companies with much less limitations on their budget usually take a week or two to close the books, and that's closing them. And then there's the analysis. Like, they're not just spitting out a report, punching it in. They're providing variance analysis, which takes some time to look at, review, dig into, to get us the information. And then we ask for the information to come out, not the day of the meeting, but to come out a week ahead of time. So when you back up the calendar, I would be surprised we could gain more than a week or so of pushing it up. And I have no idea what's really behind it. My guess is it'd be very hard to push it up even further. I mean, there's no way to 5 days after the month closes to have this meeting. That's just with November 30 data. That's just, there's no, I don't think Microsoft does that internally.
Be miraculous if you could.
But it could very well be a technology issue. It could be an outdated system like Munis. I think that there's something that we should, look at, and possibly look at, Greenville and Horry and see how they do theirs.
Well, I want to pursue this a bit. So even if it's a technology issue in terms, which I'm not saying it is, but even if it were, and you actually close out all the transactions, to get the report to the board, to the committee, with that makes sense in terms of the financial analysis. Ms. Carlin just said a few minutes ago, beginning with the December close, then the staff would start actually analyzing and predicting where we're going to end the year. That is a set of staff members that have to sit down and do the financial analysis, as opposed to the systems, spitting out documents. The documents come out, the analysis gets done, and then we produce the reports, and that does take time.
Ms. Roberson, if I could ask you a question, because in all the companies I've been involved with, I have to agree. I don't think we've ever been, when we closed out, if we got it done in 5 days, I'm amazed, and I agree. We just had all this analysts and analytical issues, but and then there's so many changes in the discussions. But I'm trying to understand, what's the concern of trying to move it up the extra 30 days? I mean, what are you concerned about as to getting an October number in December?
Just that.
Okay. I mean, it's just.
Yeah. So the date it's 60 days out. I just think that there's a more efficient way to do it. And I don't want us to be closed-minded into looking into other, at least the other 2 larger districts, to see what they are doing before we continue to look at 60 days report. I don't think that any of us balance out our checkbooks like this, and we don't handle our personal accounts like this. And this is not how we should handle the district account. So I'm just looking at a more efficient way, and I would like for us to take some time to have that discussion about better efficiency, and at least look into it.
So
check Greenville, check Horry, and see if they're reporting 60-day out as well.
We'll certainly do that, but just for clarity, the October month closed on October 31, and so the day is December 5, and so that is 35 days since the close of October. that the report has been issued. And actually, it was issued to the committee, I think, whenever it was sent out last week through the agenda package.
Yeah. I think her point is she wants to see it sooner. I mean, we could have distributed on November 20th, but then I would be distributing a financial report before I was able to present it to Audit and Finance Committee. So it's just.
Thank you, Ms. Carlin. I don't have any other questions.
All right, we appreciate you, and we will go ahead and move forward to 4G, Moody's Investor Services Rating.
Yes, thank you. So in September, we closed on a long-term general obligation bond as well as, we got approval on a long-term general obligation bond as well as the tax anticipation notice. And so Moody's rating, Moody's Investor Services actually did ratings on both of those issuances. And I'm just happy to report that we maintained the district's AA2 issuer rating, as well as the AA2 rating on our long-term general obligation unlimited tax bonds, and the AA3 rating on the district's general obligation bond anticipation notes. That's just very positive news. We've said this before, but some factors that could lead to an upgrade in these ratings, significant and sustained improvement in fund balance and liquidity, as well as the moderation of long-term liabilities ratios. And factors that could lead to a downgrade of the rating include trend of operational imbalance that arose our fund balance, and then large increases in overall leverage or fixed costs. Just wanted to share that with y'all.
Thank you for that. Do we have any questions or comments regarding the Moody's rating? Right, hearing none, we will move forward to 5, which would be items for the board meeting. At this point, I would see the 2A and 2B, the 3 action items. For the information items, we definitely need 4B, 4C, 4D, E, F. I would say everything except for A. I don't believe we need that over to the board. We can send that as a board update. And I would think actually 4G is what could be a board update. Do you believe? What y'all think? I think that could just be a board update as opposed to sending it over to the board.
We can do that.
Yeah. All right. Hearing that, I believe the next one will be 6A. Our upcoming meeting will be January 3rd. We will be coming right off of the new year. Y'all got me hitting the ground running.
And that's Wednesday instead of Tuesday.
That's a Wednesday as opposed to a Tuesday, with the second being the first day of school back. So we'll give us that third, that Wednesday the 3rd. All right. I will.
Have a question for Jack.
Okay.
Last did you change that this time? Did the committee change it now?
I am not sure, but I can look up in Board Docs.
Let's take a look at that. And as we look that up, I will say next month we will be looking at a different way of organizing the meeting, where we will actually be adding public comments in as well at the middle, so to talk on any of our information items. So I will talk to each of you about that, and hopefully it'll make us a little bit more efficient, and actually we are able to get some feedback on some of the issues that we have going on of that month. All right. We're just waiting on one clarifying.
We actually have it on January 10th at 2 p.m.
Okay. So we're moving forward at January 3rd at 2 p.m.
The reason why we moved it last year, because the staff's going to be on the holiday break for 2 weeks, and coming back and having one day to pull all this together is probably a challenge. And so we moved it out the committee moved it out one week to ensure that you all had the appropriate data that you needed to make decisions.
So we have committee of the whole on January 8th. I'm wondering if that's why we weren't able to do that.
Mhm.
And then the board meeting on January 22nd.
It was week after week. Yep. It's not gonna work that year. For next month. We will have a shorter, there won't be too many action items that won't be needed and not as many information items that won't be needed. If you know me, I don't like long meetings. So we would, if it ain't needed, make it an update. All right. So with that being said, we are going ahead and adjourn. We need a motion to adjourn. I move. Second. We got a second. We are